Hello and welcome to Connections. We are a Bible study of the New Hope Missionary Baptist Church. We're physically located in the city of Jersey City, New Jersey, and we want to welcome you aboard with us as we continue in a brand new study. That's right, we have been for the past two episodes walking through a subject that is near and personal to just about every last one of us. And in case you haven't heard, we have been talking about the issue of navigating grief. How do you get through it? How do you deal with it? It's life changing. It will definitely, when you go through the journey, you come out on the other side or you continue through it, you will be changed. So we want to say to you, thank you for joining us, and hope and prayer, as always, is that everything is all right with you and everything is well with you and your family. So as we go through this study, we want to invite you to come alongside of us and join us. We open discussion. We really value your participation. We urge you at this critical time, if you have a family member, a friend, a loved one who has recently experienced loss, the death of someone, something, or someplace, that this would be a nice, safe place to gather and get the tools and the resources you need to help assist in bringing about healing. Okay, that's what we are about. And just so you know, there are a lot of people who are in the congregation where I pastor who are bored tonight, and that we are grieving the lossing, the passing, the death of our chairman of deacons, Deacon Robert Cowell. But I woke up the other day with a new realization and woke up in a brand new world. And I've been talking to people, and a lot of people are grieving on a national scene. They're grieving, some are grieving the recent uh, results of our national election, and that is a form of loss. And we're going to tell you that grieving that loss is in many ways similar to what some people may feel in losing a loved one, losing a thing, losing a place. So it is all equally real. Okay, so we want to make that clear to you. So whatever side of the political aisle you're on, whatever side of the divide you're on, I'm hoping at this time that we can get past the pain, the hurt, all of those things, and we can start moving toward healing. So it's going to take a while. It's a process. And we want to say to you, welcome aboard. We also want to welcome all of our friends who've joined us by way of Facebook and YouTube. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. We're going to continue where we left off. We were talking about processing grief, some of the things that you and I go through when we face grief. Okay, uh, and we're going to really look at some resources that I think could be helpful to you. So I want to share some of them right off the top. Okay, let's begin. Okay, here are some books. I'll make the screen bigger so you can take a look at them. These are not to by all means or any means to suggest that these are the only resources out there. These are just some of the resources that I have been using as I've been putting together this particular course. Okay, there is a lot of material, thankfully, around the subject of grief and loss. So I'm just bringing together some of the resources. One is, and this one you can find online, Faith Doesn't Erase Grief. It's a very, very good book, especially for people who are Christians. And because some Christians believe that as long as I believe, everything is going to be all right. But when you lose someone, something, some place that has been significant to you and important, uh, sometimes our faith can be challenged. Okay. The other is grief, living at peace with loss. Okay. And it's a nice book by June Hunt, and highly recommend that as a resource to you. Also, I have a book that has helped inform me. It's Navigating Grief, and I have my little personal copy right here. This is, for me, an interesting book. I like the style of the author. He writes a story and he keeps plugging us into the story and giving us insights about the grieving process as he talks about real people in his life and real situations that he went through, some of which may mirror the very situations that you may be going through or have been through. Another book is Reflections for the Grieving Soul. This book by Mike Napa is a pretty good book in that they have a lot of devotions. They are prayers and things that you can offer up and scripture. I like this book because this book is probably, of all the resources I'll share with you, is immersed in scripture. If you like to read the Bible, if you want a word from the Lord, these are brief passages that you can snap up in a second, read, commit to memory, or just read through as a devotional guide. So, Reflections for the Grieving Soul. Okay? And then there's another resource I've added, which I think is invaluable. I've used it and have been using it to help us formulate the map for this course. And it's also is entitled Navigating Grief. There's no relationship between Anna Darbone or Kirk Neely. They're two different authors who happened to write a book and gave it the same title, Navigating Grief. Okay, but this is a good workbook. It has some tremendous resources. Uh, I will literally be walking through this book. Okay, I will be walking through this book as a textbook on what we need to be doing. I'll be adding stuff from other resources that we lifted up, and then I'll also show you some other things that I am reading to help inform me as I teach this course. Now, J.S. Park wrote a book that I think is very good, and it says, Grief is universal, grief is individual, and grief is not about letting go. Okay, those three sentences are shocking and provocative, and this book is entitled As Long as You Need. Okay, we need to give people what we call permission to grieve. I was with someone today, and somebody was saying to someone, it's about time for you to get yourself together. If people want to put constraints on your grieving and tell you, come on, let's get real now. Come on, it's been X amount of time. And that's a good book, okay? Bearing the Unbearable, Love, Loss, and the Heartbreaking Path of Grief, okay? This book this is another book like Navigating Grief workbook. It's good on process. Helps somebody understand some of the steps that you go through when you go through grieving, okay? And how to negotiate those different places in the grief process, all right? So those are some of the things that inform me, and I always like to let students know that I didn't just develop this course out of thin air. I didn't snap my finger and it came to me. I'm reading some of the best minds and best thinkers out there in order to bring you what I think is something that could be helpful to you, your family, your friends. Okay? So Grief, again, is the natural response to significant loss. Now, I want to underscore this because we are surrounded by death. I mean, let's be honest. Every time you turn on the news, every time you go on social media, every time you look around, somebody's dying. We hear of famous people. Just heard Quincy Jones passed. This person passes. We always are being alerted to the death and the moving on of people, okay? But we don't grieve everyone that we hear about. We can hear about somebody in another country who died. There was a landslide, there was a mudslide, there was a tsunami, and we may hear that 1,000 people died, 10,000 people died, any number of people passed, but we don't grieve those people in many instances because they were not significant to us. The fact that you grieve and the fact that you have a response to loss means this, that that person, that place, or that thing was significant to you. It was important to you enough to get your attention, to cause you to go through a process, to cause you to feel empathy, to have an emotional response to the loss. So we don't do that to everybody. We don't do that for everybody. Okay? Sometimes we hear about a loss and it goes over our head. We hear somebody pass and we're like, oh, sorry, you have my condolences. Sometimes if the person or place or thing is significant, it can stop us in our tracks. It can literally cause us to pass out, faint, fall out, okay? Especially if that person, place, or thing was significant to you. So that's a big word that we're going to keep talking about over and over, is significant, okay? All right, so let's go on. Now, this class, I got to continue to give this disclaimer because every week we are constantly having new people come aboard. And I want to be honest with you. I don't want to set myself up as somebody who needs to be on a pedestal, needs to be praised, this and another. I'm a pastor, okay? I pastor a local congregation in New Jersey's second largest city, okay? Here's what I want to say to you. You, that means you, not me, that means you are responsible for obtaining such medical or other professional advice as appropriate. If you fear that your grief has or could trigger thoughts that pose a threat to yourself or others, we urge you to immediately seek professional advice. Okay? Second point. Reverend Dr. Alonzo Perry Sr. is not a licensed therapist or a psychologist. This class is based on his practice as a pastor. He does not provide medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinions, treatment services to you or any other individual. All right. So as long as we get the groundwork down and you know that I'm not here writing out medication, I'm not here providing advice in the place of your doctor or your medical practitioner. I'm a pastor who comes from a Judeo-Christian perspective, who has 40 years of experience preaching and 27 plus years, almost 27 plus years pastoring. I've been at the bedside of people who were transitioning, who were dying. I've counseled people who were in early throes of grief and mourning. I've counseled people who have been uh, dealing with the debilitating aspects of grief years into the process. I've held people's hands. I've hugged them. I've been there. I felt it. I have experienced loss in my own life. I've lost people in my family, friends of mine who were significant to me. Okay, I've lost relationships. I lost uh, places and things. Okay, so I'm not just talking uh, theoretically or clinically, but I'm talking experientially, that I have, and I am also a fellow journey person, a journeyman on this thing called grief. Now, when we left off, we were talking about some myths and misconceptions about grief. Okay, so before we go on the larger part of our what we want to unpack in this session, I wanted to continue with some of the myths around and about grief. Okay, listen to this. Okay, some people say that when you grieve, the first year is the worst. That's a myth. Everybody doesn't grieve the same. Some people may not even start the grief process till after a year. Some people have no recollection of the first year. Some people can tell you it's been 4 years, it's been 10 years, it's been 15 years, it's been 20 years, and that year 20 is more painful than year number one. It is a myth. If anybody ever tells you it's going to get better after year one, you need to just take that advice and put it to the side. Grief is not the same for everybody. Maybe when that person walked through their grief journey, maybe for them, after year one, everything got better. But grief, as we're going to find out, does not have a timetable. Okay? So if you have comments, if you want to, put a hallelujah up there, an amen, or whatever, you can put that in the comment field. Okay? Second myth around grief is that children should not attend funerals. Now, here's what the best advice I've been getting and giving to people on this misconception about grief is that sooner or later, children are going to come face to face with death. Pop, granddad, grandma, nana, somebody is going to die. Okay? We can't, as much as we want to shelter our children and keep them from harm, death is a part of living. Okay? Trying to hide a child from the realities of life by saying we're not going to let him or her go to the funeral because we don't want them to know that so and so passed may seem like a good way to go at the present moment. But that child is inevitably going to have questions like, where is so and so? And, children are going to lose things. We talk about grieving, right? We talk about losing people, places, and things. Children wind up having at early ages to move. They're in a military family, they have to move. So all the friendships they made, they're gone. Okay? The house they live in, they move to another one. Okay? Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. And sometimes if we're just as parents, just outright honest with them and say, look, grandma, grandpa, whoever it was, died. And you have a chance to have a discussion about what is death. Sooner or later, the goldfish is going to die. Sooner or later, the pet, the dog or cat or whatever, is going to die. So it's a myth that children should not attend funerals. Now, things you have to judge what's age appropriate for a child. Okay, but we also tell people, please be careful when you talk to children about death, that you don't just tell them that your mommy went to sleep. Because they do know what sleep is, right? And so now they're going to be thinking that every time they go to sleep or if mom or dad goes to sleep, or if my brother or sister go to sleep, or if I go to sleep, am I going to wake up? So we got to be more creative, and just like what Jesus had to literally tell his disciples when he told them that Lazarus sleeps, and they said, well, if he sleeps in John chapter 11, they said he does well. And finally Jesus had to say, hold on, y'all didn't get it. Lazarus is dead. And they got it when he said that. Okay. And sometimes we have to realize the children are more resilient than many of us give credit for. And we cannot always be there to protect our children from pain. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So that's a myth that children shouldn't attend funerals. Here's another myth that when someone dies, your relationship ends. Now, I don't know who came up with this idea. And it causes people really to not even want to go through the grief process because they think if I go through the process, that means I'm going to forget them. That means it's going to be over. That I'm never going to think about her. I'm never going to think about him. They'll never be important to me. But that's a myth. Okay? If someone has been significant to you, they don't cease being significant just because they died. Okay? Is making sense? Okay? So when somebody dies, and some of you who've been on a grief journey before know that, sometimes death has a peculiar way of strengthening relationships. We find ourselves sometimes wanting to be around people more, sensing their presence, being aware of them, more, having a heightened response to things. Somebody says something, they say, boy, that reminds me of mom. Oh, that reminds me of dad. That reminds me of my sister, my brother, whoever the person we lost, whatever the place that we lost or the thing that we lost. Okay. So when somebody dies, the relationship doesn't end. And we got to start getting this message through to people so that they can be, stop being afraid to take the steps to grieve. Because somebody has told them, if you grieve, you're not going to remember her anymore. You're not going to remember him anymore. Okay? But one thing we'll learn throughout this process, throughout this course, is that we will never forget people who were significant to us. I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar that you are never, ever going to forget the person who brought you in the world, the person who put a roof over your head, the person who was a friend when you needed that friend. Okay? So the relationship doesn't end. We'll talk about what can happen to the relationship. But ending, that's not it. Okay? Here's another myth. If you keep talking about your grief and your loved one after blank, then you're stuck. Okay? Uh, I like what Deacon Anderson said. Sometimes when we lose people that we love, sometimes it can make us strengthen our relationship with other family members. Sometimes nothing like a cold, glass of water or waking up and smelling the coffee and realizing that, hey, what happened to them may eventually happen to me. And I want to have a stronger relationship. So thank you for that input. Okay? So here's the other myth that we were talking on. So, people think that grief has a timeline, that you grieve a certain amount of time, and after that time, if you're still grieving, something's wrong. Okay? We're going to talk about that because Dr. Anna Darbone, she makes a great point in her book, in her workbook, Navigating Grief, talking about how DSM guide, this is a guide that psychologists and doctors use to diagnose disorders. And extreme grief has now become a diagnosed disorder. Okay. And there's some people say that if you grieve over a certain amount of time, then something's wrong with you. Okay, so we're going to get deeper into this. We just wanted to give you some of these myths. Now, here's a myth that is really prevalent, okay? And check this out. You dishonor the one you mourn if your grief lessens or you move forward with your life. That's just not, you're not honoring her, you're not honoring him, because now, you're talking to other people, you're doing other things, you're not going to the graveside every weekend. You know, that's a myth. And we're going to talk about it because a lot of times with people, they get stuck in these places where they can't grieve properly because they've had people whispering in their ears these notions that are false. This mythology around grieving, that if you're not always crying in public, you really didn't miss her. You really don't miss him. If you don't break down at the mention of their name, then you know, you know, he doesn't seem to feel. Okay, it's a myth. Everybody grieves different. Okay, all right. So here's another myth. Okay, now this myth, especially if you're a Christian, and I think we kind of landed on this a little bit before, but faith always lessens grief. Let me be honest with you. You can have the faith to move mountains. Okay, as Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, if I give my body to be burned, if I have all this and have all that, all the other, he says, if I have not love, it profits me nothing. Well, you can have all the faith in the world, but it won't lessen the fact that you've lost something, someone, someplace, something that is significant. I mean, let's wake up, people. Even Jesus wept. So faith does not always lessen grief. A lot of times people hide behind faith so that they don't take the grief journey. So they look stoic. They look strong on the outside. And they say, oh, my faith and trust is in Jesus. But in those quiet hours when nobody's around, yeah, they have their reckoning and their comeuppances. Okay, so faith does not always lessen grief. Okay, so what I'm trying to get you to see is you're not a bad Christian if you grieve. There's nothing wrong with you if you're a Christian and you lose somebody you love and you have serious feelings. Okay, people tell you, oh, Christians don't cry. That's a bunch of nonsense. Okay, God gave us the capacity to weep. He said, blessed are those who mourn. Why? Because they'll be comforted. By whom? By God himself. So God didn't want you to cry. He wouldn't have given you tear ducts. He wouldn't say you're blessed if you do. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Okay? All right. So, all right. Now, I want to talk for a minute about when you and I should reach out for professional help. Now, I know in our culture, I know most of us, I can't say most of us, I'm going to say me, for example. I come from a group of people who I was not taught as a young person to seek out professional help. If I face trauma, I tried to deal with it on my own. If I face something, I tried to figure out a way how to survive, how to overcome. When I grew up, if you went to see a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a grief counselor, you were called weak. You were called weak. And the people who would call you weak are church people. Okay? Just turn it over to Jesus. And I stopped worrying about it. I turned it over to the Lord and he worked it out. I'm going to tell you something. If you tonight, and I hope you get what I'm saying, if you have a sudden pain in your chest, okay, on the left side of your body, and you have a tingling sensation that goes up your arm, I hope you pray, but I also hope that you call 911 and get somebody in there who God is trained to look at your heart and look at your body. Okay? If my foot hurts, and I told y'all about time when my foot was really hurting, my toe, and I was in a lot of pain. Okay? I prayed to God. Yes, I did. The God who hears and the God who heals. And I had a situation where the pain became so intense. Yes, I kept praying, but I went to my podiatrist and he asked me a question. I'm be honest with you. I'm sitting in the podiatrist's office. I'm sitting there talking to him, and he said to me, Mr. Perry, he said, I could take care of this right now, or do you want to make an appointment for me to do it later? I looked at that man like he was plumb out of his mind. I'm writhing in pain, and he asked me, do you want me to fix this now, or do you want to come back later? I said, man, whatever you got to do it now. Okay? All right. So even though I prayed, I went to the foot doctor. Now, see, some of you get this because if you got a physical ailment in your body, you're going to go to a specialist, right? Right? Now, what about if it's emotional? What about if it's spiritual? What about if it's impacting other parts of me that I can't see? I need to go somebody who specializes in working on those parts of me that may not be visible. So I may have to go talk to a counselor. I may have to go talk to a pastor. I may have to go talk to somebody who understands the grieving process and can point me in the right direction. Am I making any sense? Okay. Now, let me go on. When to consider professional help, okay? When grief brings a sense of chaos, when your whole world is upside down, and it's been upside down, and it has continued to be upside down, and right from where you are, you can't figure out how to turn it right side up. You may need to go talk to somebody who can help you. Okay? When you feel curious or start thinking about the idea of counseling, that might not be a bad idea. You need to go do the next step. Go online, go to your yellow pages, white pages, whatever. Find somebody who deals with grief counseling and make the phone call. I'm going to give you some resources in a few minutes of places that you can go online. They're not going to charge you nothing, who can help you, walk you through the grief process. Okay? When do I need to talk to a professional? When I can't speak openly or honestly about your grief experience with other people. Now, let me be clear. What I've been finding out, what most experts are telling me, is that grief really does not happen unless it's witnessed. Most of us are not going to successfully have a grief journey if we just go hide ourselves and lock the door and don't let anybody in. The best grief journeys are the journeys that are out in public, where folk can help you, where folk can uh, be a support for you and help you get to where you need to go. Okay? Grieving is not a closed door, turn your back, shut the world out process. That's not grieving. Okay? I don't want to talk to nobody. I want to see me cry. I just want to deal with this by myself. You're not ready for the grief process. You're not on the grief journey. Okay? You may still be in anger, you may still be in shock, you may still be some other place, but you have not yet begun to put yourself in a place where you can start this process. Okay? Especially if you can't talk about it. Am I making sense? Okay. Now, you may need professional counseling. If you be honest and look at yourself, and realize that you don't have the tools that you need to cope with your emotions. You're always blowing up. You're always getting upset. You're always stressed out. Your communication is suffering, or you don't know how to set or keep boundaries. You may need to bring somebody in your life who can talk to you and help you through these difficult places. Okay? If you need more tools to cope with your emotions, reducing your stress, having better communication, or setting and keeping boundaries, you may need to talk to a professional. Okay? Uh, Experiencing a traumatic loss. Okay? So people don't realize how a loss of someone who is significant in your life, how it will impact you. We talked in the first episode, and you can go online and download it and see it. We talked about secondary losses. We talked about not just the loss of the person, the place, or the thing, but the loss of income, the loss of companionship, the loss of support, the loss of an extended family, the loss of other things that ripple throughout your life because you lost a significant part of it. So it's not just the person you lost, it's the other things that go along with the person. Okay? And if you're not able to cope with that, you need to get some help. Okay? If you can't sleep well and you don't eat well, okay? I mean, you get up, you get 2 cups of coffee, and you depend on that coffee to take you through a whole day. Breakfast comes, I'm not hungry. Lunch comes, you didn't eat. It's time to go to bed, and you look back and say, what did I eat? Oh, I had a cup of coffee. You might very well need to engage somebody, talk to somebody who can help you negotiate these hurdles that you're running to on this grief process. That's what we tell people. It's always important for us when we have a significant loss, especially early on in that loss, to have people around us. Because remember, we talked about being in shock and being numb. You don't know until you lost somebody you love quickly 24 hours can go and you not eat, take your medication, you not take care of yourself, and it happens like that. Okay? So if you find yourself, you can't sleep well, you lay down, if you were married, that person's not there anymore. So you don't want to go to bed. Okay? You don't want to eat. You need to talk to somebody. Am I making sense? Okay. Now, let me see. When we talked about sharing, setting and keeping boundaries, we're talking about emotional boundaries. Okay. Uh, a lot of times, and I'm not saying this is going to happen to anybody, but a lot of times when we lose somebody significant, our guard is down. We start trusting people that maybe we shouldn't trust. We start forming relationships that maybe are too sudden because we don't have those emotional boundaries in place. Okay? Uh, you know, let me say this. I don't want to sound cruel, okay? But I want to say this in the lovingest way that I know how. Men and women process grief differently, very differently. Take a case study, okay? You take 2 people, man and a woman, both of them have been married 30 years, okay? The man dies and the woman decides to go on, devote her life to her children, her grandchildren, her career, whatever she's doing. A lot of times when the wife dies, that man may find himself in another relationship within a year. Okay? And a lot of times that's because they want the emotional support. They want to have the physicality, the sexuality, all those things, but they haven't created sufficient barriers. Okay? And they know how to keep barriers. Okay? So they wind up in relationships that they thought were going to replace the person they lost, and it didn't happen. Does that help you out at all when I'm talking about when I talk about boundaries, Sharon? Hopefully that was helpful. Okay. Uh, so we got to realize that we got to be able to set boundaries. We got to be able to do everything. And if we can't do them, then we need to get some help. Okay. And we talked about eating. Okay. Let me see. Let me put this. Okay. Uh, if you think that you may be stuck or impaired by your grief, you definitely need to find somebody you trust that you can talk to. And understand, a lot of times it does not have to be a professional licensed psychologist, uh, therapist, a psychologist. Sometimes it could just be a trusted friend, a pastor, somebody who you can just trust to say, look, I feel like I'm stuck. I feel like I've been in the same place and I want to move on. Because let me tell you something, a lot of people miss the cues. When your body and mind send a signal to you and you say, I think I'm stuck, okay, what you are saying is, I know I need to start the grief process. I know I need to be on this journey. Where I've been and where I've been staying is detrimental to me. Okay, so it's your body's way of saying to you, look, you got to do something. You got to kick it in gear. You got to do something. You got to get some help because you're in a dangerous place. And so you got to start the grief process, the journey. Okay, and sometimes biologically, we just get that sense in us. It's time for me to do something. I was talking to somebody as early as tonight who said, they lost a significant other in their life, and they just went off the handle for a few days. But then they knew after a few days they had to get up and take care of business and start doing what needed to be done. Okay, some people can't get up and do it in 3 days. Some people may need some help. Okay, all right. Now, struggling to function or engage in day-to-day life. Okay, for some people, when they lose a significant person in their life, it's just enough just to get up in the morning. Okay, and then you got to go to work. All right, you got to produce. You got to be around people who may be supportive, and some people who may just be like, just get the job done. And so, if you're around that, you may need to talk to somebody. Maybe you're dwelling in guilt and shame. Maybe you feel like you're worthless. We get this a lot. People feel like, okay, when my loved one was alive, or maybe they got sick, maybe they got ill, maybe they were in a hospital, maybe it was a prolonged illness before death, and they didn't go visit them. They didn't get to the hospital. They didn't even pick up the phone to call. Okay? And so now they are feeling guilty. They may have done something that they never asked for forgiveness about. And so they feel shame. They feel like, I'm worthless. They feel like, I don't even deserve to be alive. If you feel like you're self-loathing, you're hating yourself, feel like you're not worth a dime, you feel the shame, you've been heaping this guilt all over yourself, you need to talk to somebody. Okay? That's all we're saying. Right? Now, some people, unfortunately, to cope with their sense of loss, with the significant loss of person, place, or thing, may start using drugs, may start using alcohol, try to, drown it in the bottle, may start using, drugs to pick them up in the morning, and then use a drug to put them to sleep at night, and then get addicted. And, it's like, they're an addict. And you can't medicate grief. I want to be honest with you. You can't medicate grief. You can't drink grief out of your life. It hurts. It's probably one of the most painful things you'll ever go through in your life. But most of us will tell you, because as drunk as you get and as high as you get, when it is over, okay, you still wind up with your loss. Your loss doesn't go anywhere. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, maybe you're having thoughts about death. You've lost your loved one. You feel like I'd be better off dead, or I should have died. I should have died with him. I should have died with her. I should have died instead of them. If you have any thoughts like that, please get some. Okay? We don't understand why our loved ones have to leave us, and some of them leave us so abruptly and suddenly till we don't have a chance to even much as say goodbye. Okay? But grief will pull at you from every angle possible. And if you're not aware of this, grief can take you down a long road. Okay? So you need to find somebody, you know, that, okay? So I don't know what victim's remorse is, Sharon. I'll be honest with you. I'll try to find out some more and bring that up in the future. Okay? All right. Now, therapy, honestly, is a great resource for everybody. Everybody should, you know, find somebody you can talk to, find a therapist. So find somebody who can help you navigate some of these issues. Okay? Now, some resources, okay? Here's a website, okay? This website is called Center for Loss and Life Transition. These websites, I've been on them. They're good. You know, they're not here to take you on a ride, money and all that stuff, okay? Centerforloss.com. You put it in your browser, one word, centerforloss.com, okay? And you go there and they have real resources to help people like you, ordinary people, deal with grief. Okay? Let me see. I got another one here. Let me pull it up. I'll just leave on the screen for a couple seconds. Maybe you can screenshot that. Now, here's a good website. The Doogie Center, the National Grief Center for Grieving Children and Families. And here are three websites. Dougie.org, Dougy.org, grief.com, and modernloss.com. These are all good websites to go to, and they walk you through it. You got drop down menus. What are you feeling? What do you need help with? Uh, they even have parts of the websites where you got people you can talk to. You don't have to do this by yourself. Okay? Another one is opentohope.com. Opentohope.com. Option B.org/grief. Now I think that was a fun site when I went there to check that out. Option B.org/grief. Refugeingrief.com. Okay? Now, you don't have to go to all these sites. You might find one that hits you off immediately. You may want to just go and experiment and toy around in some of them and see what they offer you. But they are designed on whole to offer you some additional resources. Okay, to deal with grief. Okay. Now, in the time that we have left, we're gonna switch gears. We're gonna go into really part 3 of this series. Okay. And in this part 3, we are going to be dealing with. Let me move over here. Yeah, that's better. We will cover the universal nature of grief. Okay, just in case you didn't know it, humans grieve, and we have a universal nature to our grief. It's not the same across the universe, but it is so similar. Okay, uh, pitfalls that may arise during the grief journey. Okay, I'm keep talking about grief and I keep referring to it as a journey. Okay. It's a destination, a trip that you and I are going to take. It is not always, mapped out. We don't know where it's going to take us. And because it's a journey and we're not always clued in onto where it's going to take us, we have to be open to where grief leads us. Okay. Grief may lead you down some places that you don't really want to go. Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about something clinically that's being talked about a lot. Okay. And this is what I call what it means to heal. Okay. Now, Dr. Darbone in her book talks about this because this is interesting. According to the culture, and we talk about what it means to heal. Let me see, I got it right here in the workbook. Okay. Now, we talk about healing. You got to realize that clinicians, these are people who are trained in the field around grief, maybe gerontology, aging, psychology, psychiatry, therapy. They are governed by a medical book that has diagnoses in it. And what happened is, in terms of grief has been, medically, the medical institution DSM-5-TR is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders Text Revision, as a book of clinical guidelines used by physicians. Okay. And they call people who experience grief for more than a certain period of time, they call it a disorder. Okay. They call it prolonged grief disorder. I want you, Dr. Tyler, if you can put that in the comments for us. Prolonged grief disorder. Okay. So what does that mean? It means now clinicians and professionals across the world, the U.S. especially, have a diagnosis that they can diagnose people uh, who are experiencing what they call prolonged grief disorder. Now, why are we talking about this? Because what happened is clinically, in order to receive this diagnosis, okay, people say that you have to be going through the grieving process, stuck in the process, not able to move after 1 year. Okay. 1 year for the clinician becomes the magical timeline. Okay. We're going to talk about what that means for us, because what happened is to grieve really means that I'm human. Okay. It's something that is germane to our species. We grieve. You know, grief is important because when we grieve, it really reveals to other people what's important to us, because we don't grieve everything. We don't grieve everyone. So we grieve what is important to us. Okay. So when you recognize that, you say, okay, that's good. Okay. Now, Here, I'm going to get into some things that may be a little bit controversial, but I want to share this with you, okay? Grief connects you to gratitude for having that person or thing in your life, okay? One thing that we try to help people see that no matter where you are in the grief process, we go through it because that person, that place, the thing has been important to us, okay? And because of its importance, we now uh, have some sort of feeling when it's no longer there. Okay. One of the feelings we urge people to have when they've experienced loss and want you to try this is connecting, have grief connect you with gratitude, thanking God for that person, thanking God for that place, that job, that home, that marriage, that loved one. Okay. So grief, if we allow it, can connect us to some good things that we remembered about that person, that place, or that thing. Okay? Now, no two instances of grief are exactly the same. I want you to get this. Now, if you can get this, you can start really understanding why we grieve the way we do. Okay? Now, I want to ask you the question. No two instances of grief are the same. And the question is, why is this the case? Why is this the case that no two instances of grief are the same? So you want to chime in? We'd be glad to have you. Okay? All right. Now, I'll give you the what I think is because uh, we all have different relationships with people. You could have mom and dad both die same day or with close proximity to each other. You may grieve one differently than the other because they may have meant different things to you. Okay? So, it's where am I in the grieving process? What's going on with me? Grieving will affect me emotionally, it will affect me physically, and it will affect me spiritually. So every case is different. Every grieving period is different. Okay. Even when we are family and related, one person is going to grieve different than the other. So we don't want to be guilty of trying to judge other people by our grieving. Well, you didn't cry and I did. Okay. So that doesn't mean that you love the person more than they do. Just means that you grieve different. Okay? So you may do one thing to demonstrate your feeling of loss, and the other person may do something different to demonstrate their feeling of loss. Okay? So, uh, now, so remember we started off talking about what does it mean to heal? Okay, clinically, the clinicians say, Perry, if they've been grieving a year and they haven't made substantial progress, then they are guilty of prolonged grief disorder. What we say, on the other hand, is this: grief doesn't have a timeline. Some people don't start grieving till the end of year one. Everybody don't grieve the same. So if we took the clinical diagnosis and said, after a year, if you don't do X, Y, Z, then you have prolonged grief disorder. We can't say that's true for everybody, okay? Because some people will experience one way and some will other. Now, the good thing about the DSM-5 diagnosis is that now, since the federal government, since clinicians agree that there's a diagnosis for grief, there's now federal money coming in to fund research and studies on how people process grief. Okay, now the doctors can, you go to the doctor say, well, how long has it been? It's been a year. Well, are you able to get up and take care of yourself? Are you able to do X, Y, Z? And depending on your answer, they can now refer you to other resources to help you move on in the process. Okay? So remember, as we said, no two instances of grief are the same. Okay? And the case is because we're different. Okay. Now, I want to make a distinction because you've been hearing me talk about it and people talk about it. And uh, as Deacon Anderson said, the grief for her sister was different than the grief for losing her grandson. Okay. Kudos for you for recognizing that. Because, people think, okay, you shed this amount of tears for every loss. No, we don't. No. So we've been using two words, grief and mourning. Okay, we're gonna make a distinction between what do they mean, grief versus mourning. Okay, grief is your inner experience of loss. It's what I feel on the inside. I'm grieving. My heart beats fast. I'm in pain. I feel like there's a hole in me. That's my inner experience. I feel like I'm under a cloud and I'm never gonna. I feel like I can't connect with reality. That's an inner feeling. That's grief. It involves how I think, how I feel. I may feel shame. I may feel hurt. I may feel a lot of stuff. That's the inner experience of loss. We call that grief. Now, uh, grief is an internal process. It's inside of me. Uh, while mourning, on the other hand, it's how people express the loss externally. Okay, I may be feeling something on the inside, but you see me mourn when I cry or when I stand off and don't want to be involved. That's how I externally demonstrate what's going on the inside of me. I'm grieving on the inside, but I mourn on the outside. So a lot of times what happens is people see us mourning, but they don't see our grief because a lot of us keep our grief locked in here. We don't cry in public. We don't talk about our loved one. Okay. So best people can do is say, you know, she looks okay. He looks all right. Because they think because we don't demonstrate anything that we are handling grief. But mourning is what people see. The grief is what we feel. Does that make sense? So both are part of the process of bereavement, which is the period of sadness after the death of a loved one. Okay? Mourning is how you express the grief externally. Okay? So Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn, who visibly demonstrate their grief, because they will get comfort. But if I never mourned, you never know that I need comfort. That's why one of the worst things we can do is try to keep a stiff upper lip and act like it doesn't bother us. Because nobody wants to come by you because you acting like, I don't need that. And inwardly you're broken. You're not only broken, but you're brokenhearted. You're crying. But outwardly, hey man, how you doing? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Grief is what I feel on the inside. Mourning is how I express that to you on the outside. So we get our wires mixed up. You see me, I look cool. I look like I'm in control. I look like I got everything going on. So you say, he's handling mourning pretty well. but you don't know the grief I experience. You don't know the hurt and the brokenness that I go through. You can't see my trauma and pain because I don't want to show it to you. Am I making sense? I mean, maybe I pulled up tonight at your house. Okay? All right. Now, this we talked about mourning. Mourning can include reminiscing with other people. That's why we tell people, look, one of the best things you can do when you lose a loved one is sit around and talk about what they meant to you. Share stories. Okay? Because over time, you'll find that the stories will change. When you first feel lost, you're going to tell the raw stories about, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as you get more accustomed to your grief journey, you're going to start remembering more of the good things that they meant to you. But don't be afraid to call their name. Think about this. I'm not trying to cause anybody any, discomfort. But think about how many people have lost loved ones and never called their name after they died. I don't want to talk about him. I don't want to talk about it. You would never mention that name around me again. That means that you'll never be on a grief journey. You'll never process successfully through this pain and through this valley of tears. You're going to be the Lone Ranger. You're going to go around and you're going to try to handle all of this by yourself. You're going to shut everybody out. And then you're going to wonder, Lord, why do I have to bear my cross all by myself? Well, people wanted to come in and help you carry it, but you tell them, nah, I'm good. I don't need that. I don't need to talk to nobody. Nah, we all right. I just remember the way she was. Just remember him the way he was. Yeah. So when you mourn like that, people think that you're handling grief. A lot of times we just disguise and medicate and covering up the grief. You see that? Okay. Now, healing happens by feeling your grief and working through the mourning process. Okay? Look, I got a lot to go through, but let me just go ahead and push through some of this. Now, here's what I want to tell you. If I could give you any advice for somebody who's recently lost a loved one, I cannot tell you how important it is to practice self-care, especially when you're going through grief. Because grief is the internal stuff that's working on us. Mourning is what we let other people see. Okay? But you got to practice self-care. Now, when we say practice self-care, we mean that you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to wash up, you got to, take your medication. You got to take care of yourself. Okay? Grief can affect you, as we said, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, in the last episode, we talked about ways that grief can affect us. Okay? Just real quick, put in the comment field some ways that grief can affect us. Okay? Just looking for a couple of ways that grief can affect us. How does grief affect us? Okay? Just drop it in the comment field real quick. I know you'll probably be the first one, right? So put it in the comment field. Just type it in, and okay, yeah, okay. Wow, lose your hair. Wow, it could affect your health. Wow, not sleeping good at night. How about that? Okay, uh, sleeping, it can affect eating and the way you treat others. Wow, thank y'all for your insight. Losing weight. Wow. And thank you, Dean Canary, for that. Because the flip side of it is gaining weight. Okay? So these are some ways that grief can affect us. Okay. So here's what I'm saying. Okay. Uh, Share for me a minute. Just think about it. Outside of the grieving context, outside of mourning, what are some of the, oh, Sharon says insomnia, loss of appetite, overeating. Thank you so much for sharing that. Share something that you do to relax. Share something that you do to relax. Okay. Share something that you do to, if you want to relax, what do you do? Okay. I'll tell you what I do. I don't do it a whole lot, but I'll do it. I will take a bath and sit in the tub and soak. Yeah. All right. And some of the time, my wife has been so good to me. Y'all, I got to give a shout out because the first lady is a great woman. You know, sometimes she see me while I was dragging, and not too long ago, she went out and made sure that I got a full body massage. I mean, no lie, I near about went to sleep on the table. Amen. But what do you do to relax? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Uh, Watch TV. All right. Listen to gospel music. Uh, Sitting still while wearing pajamas. Okay. Taking a long walk. That's my brother, y'all. Read a book. Okay. Uh, Play computer games. Okay. Now, I would tell you this, that these in all ways can be a form of self-care. Okay. You need to do some things that cause you to lower your stress level, okay, and help you reconnect with your mind, your soul, and your body, okay? So if it's taking a walk, if it's taking a run, if it's going out of your environment, or, you know, uh, one of the things I really love, y'all might laugh at me, when I'm riding down the turnpike, Brendan talks probably would say, yeah, he's definitely right. I love watching the planes take off and land. When they get 3 or 4 planes in the queue and you see their lights on at night and you know they're getting ready to come into EWR, I say, "Bring, look at that. Look how great God is. Those gigantic, you know, multi-ton pieces of steel. Man," I said, boy, how great God is. Okay. So go to the park. Okay. Look at the water. All right. Do those kind of things, and it can help take your mind off of the stresses of this life. You got to take care of yourself. All right. Uh, uh, so I want to say this, please, as your pastor, as your friend, please take care of yourself. Unfortunately, if you don't do it, there may not be someone else to stand in the gap. Okay? So Deacon Anderson say, like to play games. But take care of yourself. Find something you like to do that gets you off the couch, gets you off of thinking about what you have lost, and gets you to focus on yourself. Now, we talked about this earlier when we talked about the DSM, the uh, Diagnosis Statistical Mental book for mental disorders and treatments. Uh, the question is for you: how long does it typically take to grieve a loss? Okay, what do you think? How long does it take to typically grieve a loss? How long? How long would you tell somebody it should take to grieve a loss? Let me see your numbers. How long does it typically take to grieve a loss? Okay, I'm waiting on you. All right. Yeah. You know what? I was just seeing if y'all were listening, okay? Because you're right. Grief follows its own timeline, and grief has no limits. No time limit, no time limit, no time limit. Okay? If you say to somebody, it's been a year, you need to get on with it. If you say to somebody, it's been 3 weeks, you need to get your life together, you need to get up off this couch, you need to start, whatever. You don't understand grief. Because some of us who are veterans of grief journeys can tell you, some folk have been on a grief journey for 5 years. Some people have been on a grief journey for over 50 years. Okay? There's no time limit. Okay? Some of us need to be honest that the best we're going to learn to do is to live with this grief. Some of us are going to leave this planet with this grief real and raw in our heart. It don't mean nothing's wrong with you. I mean, everybody grieves different, and there's no time limit. Okay? Now, a practical approaches to grief. Let's look at this. Honor your own experience of grief. Don't let people put you down because you feel lost, or because you suddenly break out crying, or because you have feelings that you can't explain. And you want to say, I know it's been 2 years. I don't know why I'm doing it. No, honor your expression of grief, because you wouldn't feel this way if that person wasn't significant. If you didn't love that person, you would not feel like that. Okay? So when you feel that grief, when you feel those things, it's a reminder that love was real and strong. It's not something you need to apologize about. Not anything you ought to feel embarrassed about. You shouldn't be saying, well, I'm sorry. Oh, you're human. Okay? Don't look to others or your past experience with grief to determine how you should feel or act. Okay? People will tell you, well, when I went through grief, I took 2 weeks and then I went back to work and I never thought about it since. Well, that does not have to be your model. That's their experience. It doesn't have to be your experience. Okay? I don't know why you still boo-hooing. Child, you better do what I did. I'm not you. Okay? This loss is significant to me. And so I won't be put down because I don't grieve the way you do. All right? Be yourself. That's what I tell people. Look, if you're going to grieve, be yourself. Okay? If you're a hot mess, just be a hot mess. Let them deal with it. Am I making sense? Okay? Now, remember, just because you experience grief a certain way with a past loss does not mean that all future losses will be the same. Every loss is going to be unique, and it's going to be different. It's going to be a special journey. So you don't get mad and say, how come I didn't feel like this when so-and-so died? But this person died, and now I can't seem to get my right from my left. It's a different journey. Doesn't mean that you don't love that person as much as you love the other person or vice versa. It means you're on a different journey. Well, you cried a lot when mama died, but when daddy died, I ain't hear nothing. Well, don't mean I don't love daddy. It means I'm on a different grief journey. And that grief that you're looking for, that mourning, may not erupt weeks, months, years in the future. You never know when it's going to hit you. Okay? Grief has what Dr. Darbone calls an inner wisdom. Real quickly, this should help us when we're grieving, because a lot of people want to know, am I grieving the right way? Tell you, there's no right way and there's no wrong way to grieve. It's the inner wisdom of grief. Everybody will come to it and everybody will experience. it in their own different way. Okay? Now, with grief, I want to tell you, every grief journey you're on, you're a newbie. You're a beginner. Okay? It's like you've never been through it before. I mean, you can come to grief and say, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to feel this, I'm going to feel that, I'm going to feel third. And the grief will just take you and mop the floor with you because you won't feel none of that. And you'll be like, well, what happened? And then one day out of the blue, it all come cascading down on you. And you'll be like, where'd that come from? I thought I was over with this. Okay. So every grief experience we experience is new. We're novice every time. Nobody becomes an expert in the grief process. Nobody. I mean, nobody. Okay. Now, let me move to here. Okay. Now, one thing you got to understand when you're grieving, okay, is that other people may not understand your grief. You got to be at peace with that. Okay. Because your grief is a personal journey. Sometimes it can be lonely. Sometimes people don't want to help you. Okay. Now, Dr. Alan Wolfelt came up with what he called the rule of thirds, and then we're going to move on. Okay. Here's what the rule of thirds says. And I learned this, it helped me a whole lot. Here's what it says. 1/3 of the people, when you're grieving, will try to thwart your effort to heal by being critical of how you mourn. Child, you're not doing it right. You need to move on. I don't understand why you doing what you're doing. People going to be critical of you. They're going to judge your grieving by what they think is appropriate. You know what? You just need to stop acting like you're the only one that loved him or her. 1/3 of the people, when you're grieving, will try to thwart your effort to heal. They're going to be critical of you show your grieving, how you mourn. Another 1/3 of the people are going to be neutral. They ain't going to help you mourn, but they ain't going to hamper you either. They ain't not going to give you a tissue to dry your eye, and they ain't going to say no words of encouragement. They're just going to be around. So 1/3 are going to try to thwart your effort. Another 1/3 are going to remain neutral. But thanks be to God, he has another 1/3 who are going to be coming alongside of you as dedicated, empathetic companions in your grief. They're the ones who are going to be saying things like this to you. Uh, Take as long as you need. Honey, don't worry. You can cry. You can lean on me. I'll be there. You need to go to the doctor. I'll take you. Whatever I can do to support you, I'll be there for you. Okay? Everybody ain't going to do that. You got to recognize that. Don't get mad. Some people don't understand grieving. Some people figure, I went to the funeral, I shed my tears, and I'm going to work. I don't know why you still up here crying. It's been 5 years. Well, that person's not there to help you with your grief. Don't get mad at them. Recognize it. They part of the 1/3 that's going to try to stop you in the grieving process. Right? And then there are other people, I could care less. Then there are some people who God will put in your life who will come alongside you. Okay, so we're going to put a pin in it right there because I got a lot more I could talk about, but we need to be getting up in here and getting on with some other stuff. So we're going to pick up right there in our next episode. Hopefully this has been helpful to you as you're on the grief journey. We did not get to pull out our biblical character, but we will get into all of that on our next episode. But we just want to give you some tools, some help. You're not crazy. You're not out of your mind. God is still in control. Now, we want to talk to you because we know our New Hope family and friends are grieving. And so we report the homegoing of our chairman, Deacon Robert Caldwell Jr. Now, let me put this on the screen, make it larger for you. He will be starting the process of having his homegoing celebration on tomorrow. There will be viewing and visitation Friday starting at 4 o'clock at the New Hope Church from 4 to 8. During that time, if you want to have remarks, we invite you to come during the viewing and you can have your remarks. The family has already picked the people they want to speak on Saturday morning. They will be on the program. If you're not on the program, you will not be speaking on Saturday. Okay? We are opening up this opportunity for you on Friday night from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock to have your say. Okay? You can't tell it all. Deacon Robert Cowell, everybody has a story about him. Everybody has been impacted by him. He has touched so many lives. But if you want to have something to say, please come on tomorrow night between 4 and 8 p.m. What we're going to do, we're going to have people viewing his body. And while they are viewing, you are free to come up and make your comments. Okay? On Saturday morning at 10 a.m., there will be another hour of extended viewing. And then at 11 a.m., we will start the homegoing service. Please note that we're expecting a lot of people. We're asking you to bring extra grace with you, be extra loving and caring. There will be a repast afterward. We will have overflow downstairs in the lower auditorium and next door in the Christian Education building. Okay, so whatever you do, please pray for Delane Cowell. Brenda, I went over to see her today. It's good to have family and friends that can help support you. And we want you to continue to pray for her. We pray for Deacon Cowell's daughter, Keisha, his grandson, Seth. Let's pray for the family that they can grow stronger through this grief journey. And we're praying for the New Hope Church family. We're praying for you. We know that this came as a shock to many of you, but our God is still able to keep all of us from falling. We put him and we put all of you in the care of our God. So as we get ready to go, we're going to pray, and then we'll have closing. Okay? Okay, let's pray. Lord, thank you for this time that you've allowed us to come together to look at this grief process. Our hearts are heavy. We've lost a loved one. We lost a friend. We lost a companion, a fellow traveler. So we pray, God, that you would be with us. And many of us on the national scene don't know which way is up with our nation and its politics. And so we grieve that too. But Lord, we put all of these cares and concerns in your hand because we know that your hands are bigger and your hands are stronger. Go with us and stand by us. Give us your mercy, your peace, your joy that is able to surpass any of our understanding. We ask you to bless us and keep us, we pray, in the name of our Christ. Amen. Well, my brothers and sisters, I want to thank you for joining us in this episode of Navigating Grief Part 3. We hope that something has been said to help you in your grief journey. Please check out our previous episodes on Facebook or YouTube. Hope that something has been said to help you move yourself along in your grief journey. Until we meet again. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know your labor is not in vain in the Lord. God bless you.